party says it is necessary to stem what they deem to be harmful foreign influence. But the opposition has denounced it as the Russian law, saying the bill is a sign of Moscow's influence over Georgia and will make joining the EU more difficult. Demonstrations have been taking place in the Georgian capital over recent days. Protesters with Georgian and EU flags have clashed with police with attempts to break down barricades outside Parliament. From the capital, Tbilisi, our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, sent this report.
Minutes after the vote, anger erupted outside the Georgian parliament. Protesters trying to force their way in, prizing back the barricade. Then the inevitable police response, masked men leaping out, snatch squads grabbing protesters and dragging them away. The police ran amok, scattering the crowd, goading and taunting them. The people of Georgia have seen the future, and the future looks Russian. They are determined to fight it.
So the protesters have retreated now down the avenue here, and they are keeping their distance from a lot of security forces who have moved in here. So riot police here in their helmets. Behind them, a number of water cannon trucks and other security forces vehicles. But let's show you here, up the street here, the numbers of police here. Huge numbers of police have moved in there. They seem to have lost control of the Parliament building for some of the time this afternoon. They're making up for it now with massive force.
For some, it was all too much, reduced to tears, screaming in outrage at their own police. Line after line of them masked and sinister, some of them armed.
We tell the police to stop hurting people, but the call has been made from the top to run the people over.
Then they moved in, determined to seize back control, pushing protesters away from the parliament. Earlier, there'd been more chaos inside, MPs exchanging blows. But the opposition wasn't able to block a law seen by many as the beginning of the end for democracy and freedom in Georgia. Outside lines were drawn between an army of police and a sea of protesters determined to face them down.
I think the most vivid picture of what is the mood in this country. On the one hand, you see the youth, the committed people, committed to freedom and independence of this country and for Euro-Atlantic future of this country. And on the other side, you see black, Russian-led group of violent mob. Actually, they are not policemen. They are beating up people. They are violently attacking people. But these people are not afraid because this country is ours.
They believe their dream, Georgia joining the European Union, is threatened by an increasingly authoritarian government beholden to Moscow. The battle is only just beginning, this former president of Georgia told us.
I think we are standing firm on who we are and who we were. We are free people, and we are free people that claimed independence 30 years ago, and we're fighting for this independence. And now there is an attempt to take us away from our natural trajectory where we are and where we have been.
They are in it for the long haul. By evening, protesters were back in force.
If the government of Georgia had hoped that passing this bill would send people home feeling defeated, they will be sorely disappointed. The opposite has happened. People have poured into Tbilisi in their thousands, determined to have their voices heard.
Despite their show of people power, they have lost another stage in their battle for the future of their country, but are determined to fight on.
And Dominic joins us live. You've been right in the midst of it today, Dominic, but what now for Georgia and international reaction to it?
Well, I think the first thing to say, Anna, is that both sides are not backing down. We are outside the Parliament. It's 1 in the morning. People are settling down for the night here. A lot of protesters here, and they're also holding another major intersection across town, half an hour away from here. So the vote went against them, but they are undaunted, and they're expecting the world to come to their aid and to pressure the government to relent on this bill. And the government, in turn, is not backing down either, pushing the law, this detested law, through Parliament, regarded as a pro-Kremlin law, but also not restraining their police, despite a lot of international criticism of what was seen as police brutality yesterday, repeated again today with a number of protesters badly beaten and dragged away by snatch squads. I think the point to make, Anna, is that this place, that the parliament here, ever since 2003, where Georgia had one of their first colour revolutions, throwing off the yoke of Soviet domination, Georgia has been seen, and that parliament is seen as a symbol of democracy in the post-Soviet space. It's where people come from more repressive parts of Central Asia to enjoy the freedoms here, and where a lot of Russians, tens of thousands of Russians, fled into Georgia at the beginning of the Ukraine war. So what happens here is going to be seen across the region as very important. If this repressive law is imposed and it is able to lead to the crushing of freedom and democracy here, it won't just be chilling in Georgia, it will be across the region, which is why it's so important how the European Union reacts to this, but also how America responds. Chief diplomat here from America has warned that it could lead to sanctions, and people here are going to watch very closely to see if those words are followed through on.
Dominic, live for us there in Tbilisi. Thank you. Now, drugs such as Ozempic and Wegovy have been the talk of the rich and famous for a while, but they are increasingly entering the mainstream, with more and more people prepared to pay their own money to benefit from the drug's proven ability to induce weight loss. But now a new study suggests that their benefits could range even further, including the potential to cut the risk of heart attacks or strokes by around 20%. Here's our science and medical correspondent, Thomas Moore.
So I am buzzing after getting on the scales yesterday and getting to £100 lost.
For 30 years, Cherie has been in a futile battle with her weight. Nothing kept the pounds off until she tried Ozempic and Wegovy. In just 1 year, she lost 6 stone. The drive to binge on food has stopped. Even the craving to vape, gone.
I just think, I wonder what else this medication is going to afford for me to do. I wonder how much better it's going to make me feel. I wonder if I'm going to have another week where I'm binge-free. I wonder if I'm going to have another week where I'm not emotionally eating, or I'm not feeling down, or I'm not feeling sad. This medication has changed my life.
New research could lead to a revolution in how the NHS uses semaglutide, the active ingredient in Wegovy and Ozempic. For the first time, results show people lose weight and keep it off in the long term if they stay on the drug. Yet NHS prescriptions are limited to just 2 years. And the drug also dramatically reduced heart disease, even if people don't lose much weight. Doctors who led the study believe it might one day be taken like statins or blood pressure drugs to keep people healthy.
The NHS and guidelines will have to take these findings into account. And this was a very big study, international study, so there's very good evidence, and more studies are coming out in the next few months to demonstrate that the drugs work not just on heart disease, but may benefit other important diseases.
Semaglutide mimics a hormone released in the gut called GLP-1. People taking the drug feel fuller faster. This new study showed that over 4 years they lost an average of 10% of their body weight. But scientists now know it has cardiac effects, reducing the risk of heart attack, stroke and deaths from heart disease by 20%. And it also has impacts in the brain, with research underway on Alzheimer's, Parkinson's and addictions.
One of the biggest issues at the moment in terms of these drugs and why we're not seeing many more is because of the costs. And the costs are simply too high for the number of people we would wish to treat for the NHS to be able to afford it. So they really do need to come down over time.
Cherie doesn't just eat less now, she eats better. Another mysterious effect of the drugs. Some scientists are cautious about rolling them out more widely when they don't fully understand how they work. But she hasn't felt this good in decades. Thomas Moore, Sky News in High Wycombe.
To France now, where a manhunt is underway after 2 prison officers were killed after an attack on a prison van in Normandy. French media say a prisoner nicknamed the Fly, who was being transported in the van, escaped with the attackers. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt sent this report from Normandy.
The target was being driven from court to prison when the ambush happened. Working out his route through this motorway toll booth probably wasn't that difficult for the hijackers. Passing motorists who could do so drove away as the violent drama unfolded. Hooded and armed with semi-automatic rifles, the gunmen, at least 4 of them, overpowered the prison officers and were ruthless. They shot dead 2 guards, seriously injured 3 more.
We were here, right here. I was chatting to my son and my neighbour, and then we heard the noise. So many bangs. I've still got cattle over there, but I didn't want to go as I didn't want to get shot.
The deadly plan worked. In the chaos and the noise, the prisoner escaped. Mohammed Amra is an organised crime boss jailed last week for robbing supermarkets. But he's also under investigation for kidnap and involvement in a gangland murder. Mohammed Amra is not a notorious high-profile criminal. But to the authorities, he was a dangerous prisoner, an escape risk, and was given what the French call special surveillance status, which rather begs the question, why wasn't the security around him much tighter? The guards who tried to repel the attack were specially trained to escort prisoners, but had none of the gang's firepower. The 2 guards who died, one had 2 young children, the other, his wife, is 5 months pregnant.
Tout. Je dis bien tout. Everything, absolutely everything, will be done to find the perpetrators of this heinous crime. They are people who consider that life doesn't matter. They will be arrested, they will be tried, and they will be punished with the same degree of seriousness as the crime they committed.
As the search for forensic clues began, hundreds of police and military-trained gendarmes were drafted into the manhunt. One of the hijackers' getaway cars was found abandoned and burned out not far from the scene. Mohammed Amra has a string of convictions and has been in and out of prison. He's known as La Mouche, the fly, because it said he's everywhere, like an annoying fly. Martin Brunt, Sky News in northern France.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Ukraine today to try to bolster morale, with claims that US military aid will make a difference in their attempts to resist a new Russian offensive. Well, Kyiv has been on the back foot for months as Russia looks to exploit shortages in Ukrainian firepower in both the east and northeast. Russia continues to push in the Donbass, particularly around Chasiv Yar, a hilltop city, which could offer a gateway to the rest of the eastern region. In the last week, they've made rapid advances in the north, capturing over 40 square miles of territory and entering Vovchansk, one of the largest towns in the region. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes has visited both front lines and reports on the challenges facing Ukraine's defenders.
Frail and frightened, they flee Russia's new front. A collective trauma. But the misery here is by no means unique. As Russia launched its assault into Kharkiv region on Friday, its forces had already long been trying to make separate advances in the east. Last week, we visited an artillery position on the outskirts of a frontline town in the Donbass. Chasiv Yar has long been under fire. A drone threat means soldiers here spend as much time as possible under cover.
In our area, it is pretty intense. There are battles every day.
Yet he reveals his unit has finally received a resupply of ammunition.
It allows us to do our job, to hold off Russian soldiers, to stop and destroy them when they attempt counterattacks.
Their artillery gun is silent for now, but not the battlefield. We hear the sound of a rocket overhead. A voice over the radio says it had been coming straight towards us before veering off. Within moments, there's more potential danger.
There's a drone overhead. The soldier says it's one of their drones, but it's impossible to be sure.
The commander has told us it's time to leave. We hear what sounds like another attack drone.
That was something incoming.
Yeah. As we head for our vehicle, we're probably still being watched. Explosive drones caused the majority of injuries seen at a nearby stabilisation hub. The soldiers we meet, though, are being treated for possible concussion, another hazard. As is sheer exhaustion after almost 2.5 years of this full-scale war.
As you can see, we have a lot of medical supply. We have all medicine what we want. It's okay.
So you just need weapons?
Yes, we just need weapons. Give me weapons.
With Ukrainian soldiers now stretched on multiple fronts, a delayed package of American munitions is starting to arrive. But the wait has come at a cost. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Eastern Ukraine.
I lied to protect him. Those are the words of the man at the centre of Trump's hush money trial. Not Trump, but his former lawyer, Michael Cohen. Cohen has been giving evidence in court for a second day, claiming the former president asked him to bury the story concerning porn star Stormy Daniels. Well, our US correspondent James Matthews has been following today's developments, joins us now from New York, and an intense day of cross-examination for Mr. Cohen today, James.
That's right, yeah, the big finish from the prosecution. They finished with Michael Cohen at lunchtime. He's been in the box for about 2 hours being cross-examined. And, of course, he's the man who ties together the case against Donald Trump. And we have been waiting for the big cross-examination, the big takedown of the man who ties the case together. What we got was a very combative tone inside court. Todd Blanche, the attorney for Donald Trump, highlighting, cementing the story of Cohen, how he used to be Trump's right-hand man and got arrested, and over the course of the past several years has turned on him, has run a multimedia business with anti-Trump merchandise, a Trump-hating, Trump-baiting business that has made him rich and has spoken of his desire to see Trump jailed. It wasn't always that way. Todd Blanche, the defense attorney, asked him about 2018, when Cohen was arrested by FBI agents in his hotel. Trump, on the phone to him, was reassuring. And he said this, we were told by Cohen. He said to me, "Don't worry, I'm the president of the United States. There's nothing here. Everything's going to be okay. Stay tough. You are going to be okay." So these are the good times between Cohen and Trump. He spoke about 2015 and how Cohen had said that Trump was a man who cared about his country. The exchange with the defense attorney was this. Blanche said to him that at the time you weren't lying about Trump and his love for his country. And Cohen said, "At the time I was knee-deep into the cult of Donald Trump." Yes, so that was what was going on inside court. Outside, we had the politics of the Trump campaign led by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. He gave a news conference and at which he called this trial a sham, said that Donald Trump was innocent. I took the opportunity to ask him a quick couple of questions as he left the stage.
Mr. Speaker, shouldn't the facts be left to members of the public sitting on the jury without influence from yourself? Sir, do you undermine the rule of law in this country by undermining this trial?
No, we stand for the rule of law.
There you go. That was the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson. And this case may finish next week, I can tell you. The defense attorney says that he may be finished with Michael Cohen at the end of play on Thursday, which would mean closing arguments, summaries and so on into next week, potentially with a verdict by the end of next week, Anna. So it's all coming to a close.
James, another fascinating day. Thank you. To the Middle East now, and even as the situation in Gaza grows more hazardous, trucks bringing much-needed aid from Jordan via the West Bank are being blocked by protesters. Tonight, Josep Borrell, the EU's Foreign Affairs representative, said he was outraged by the attacks. Here's our international correspondent, John Sparks.
They gathered at a roundabout on the highway heading south, carrying flags and weapons, carrying the same idea. They were going to stop humanitarian aid from getting to Gaza. The police came first and tried to hold them back, but their activities have become increasingly effective. This 12-lorry convoy was stopped in its tracks.
Don't give them anything. They are murder us every day.
Food aid to Gaza goes straight to Hamas, they claim.
Who are you fighting? Are you fighting Hamas or are you fighting civilians in Gaza, women and children?
We're fighting Hamas. We're fighting Hamas, and by giving this food, you think it doesn't go to Hamas? Do you really think it doesn't go to Hamas?
As the police surrounded and subdued one group of agitators, another group popped up down the road.
There can't be more than 100 protesters here, but it doesn't take many to slow things down, even to stop it. Here we go.
Their tactics have been condemned internationally. The British Foreign Secretary says it's appalling. But this group of residents and Jewish settlers don't care about that. They refuse to feed the enemy.
But the food is distributed by international aid agencies.
That's not true. That's not true. No, it's not true.
But how do you know that?
How do you know?
Are you telling me what you
Because
think or what you know?
What I know, because if you look on the track, you will see Hamas people with guns shooting on everybody, okay?
Have you been to Gaza?
I've seen. I'm watching Al Jazeera every day, okay?
One day earlier, trucks carrying aid from Jordan were intercepted on the same stretch of road. The vehicles were stopped, their contents destroyed. The authorities were nowhere to be seen. We found bags of sugar and bottles of cooking oil strewn on the ground. The UN says famine has now gripped parts of Gaza, but they're not going to receive these supplies. As we filmed, local residents stopped to laugh and shout. Burn their villages, says one. Long live Israel, another. In Gaza, nearly 450,000 people have fled the fighting in Rafah, and many have come here, a so-called humanitarian area on the coast. But there's no more room to pitch a tent, and there's virtually no aid. The UN has received little in the past 7 days. John Sparks, Sky News in central Israel.
Northern Ireland's First Minister has apologised for going to the funeral of a senior IRA member while COVID restrictions were in place. Michelle O'Neill went to the service for Bobby Storey in June 2020, saying at the time she would never apologise for attending the funeral of a friend. But today she told the COVID inquiry she was truly sorry for any harm that was caused. The Court of Appeal ruled today that the indefinite hospital order given to Valdo Kalakani for killing 3 people in Nottingham last year is not unduly lenient. The families of his victims say the outcome is no surprise, but they will keep fighting. 3 men charged with terrorism offences over an alleged plan to target the Jewish community in the northwest of England have appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court. They're accused of plotting an attack using automatic weapons and causing multiple fatalities. All 3 men were remanded in custody and will appear at the Old Bailey later this month. Now, there was a rare moment of consensus between the 2 challengers for the US presidency today after Joe Biden announced a bundle of steep tariff increases on Chinese goods, including electric vehicles. Donald Trump championed a crackdown on Chinese products when he was president and welcomed the decision earlier, but said it should go further. So why is there a political arms race to crack down on Chinese economic might? Here's our economics editor, Ed Conway.
This is a really big moment for the global economy because Joe Biden has imposed these tariffs. Let me just kind of show you what we're talking about with tariffs. Of course, that's the amount that you have to pay to get goods into a given country. And in the US, up until recently, actually, there was a standard car tariff, the most favoured nation tariff, as it's known, 2.5%. So it wasn't much for China. It wasn't much for other places that are trying to send cars to the US. Then, of course, Donald Trump came in and he raised it. He raised it by 25%. A lot of people thought Joe Biden wouldn't continue that, but now he has actually gone further. He's doubled down. Actually, he's kind of quadrupled down on Donald Trump. A new 100% tariff. That's on top of the 2.5%. So actually, it's 102.5% tariffs. Enormous tariffs. And why is the US doing this? Well, partly it's because they're really worried about competition. They're worried about competition from China. And this chart really kind of shows you that story. It shows you global exports of cars from all of these countries. So the biggies, like the US, like Germany, like Japan. And look at China, OK? So the red line here, it was really low for years and years and years, up until recently when it has overtaken everyone else. And why has it done that? It's because of electric cars. China's so dominant when it comes to electric cars. But here's the thing, they're not dominant when it comes to electric car imports into the US. This is showing you where the US is getting its electric cars from right now. And look at China, red bit over there. It's really small, actually. If I kind of just pull that across there, you see it's one of the smallest importers into the US. But of course, you've got the EU there, you've got South Korea. A big question is how many Chinese components are going into Mexican cars that then go over the border. We don't really know what's going to happen with that. What we do know is a lot of the components inside of electric cars, because it's not just about the car, it's about what goes inside it, they also come from China. So you've got the battery, the cell, as people call it. This is showing you global dominance of China. The red bits there is Chinese dominance. That dark bit there, that's the US. You can see how dominant China is when it comes to the cells, but also the chemicals inside the cells. The cathodes, China massively dominant there. The anodes, the graphite that you need inside these batteries as well. And we could extend this and look at other things as well, like hydrogen. You could look at concrete, you could look at steel. China incredibly dominant. And all of the point here is the US is trying to increase its share, but it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be difficult too, not just for batteries, but also for solar as well, because look at how China is way ahead of the rest on that as well. So it's only the beginning of a very big saga here. And of course, the next question is, what about the EU and what about the UK?
Ed Conway there. Now, the first official painted portrait of the King since the coronation has been unveiled at Buckingham Palace. The painting was done by renowned portrait artist Jonathan Yeo, whose past subjects include Idris Elba, Sir David Attenborough, Nicole Kidman and 2 former Prime Ministers. And as our royal correspondent Laura Bundock reports, it left His Majesty seeing red.
A royal reveal and the red ribbon, a hint to what's hidden behind.
It is remarkable actually how it has turned out. Has it changed that much since you last saw it? A little bit. Yeah.
The King's role certainly changed. He was Prince of Wales when the artist started.
Someone asked me if I get nervous before unveilings, and well, no, not normally, but then the subject doesn't normally become king halfway through the process. So.
The monarch butterfly here, a symbol of metamorphosis from prince to king, and a nod to his love of nature.
It is extraordinary how butterflies do come and land on your shoulder if you're in the garden sometimes. It's rather marvellous.
The artist had 4 sittings with the King, and as for all that red...
The idea for the colour came from the fact, that very red Welsh Guards tunic. If that was on its own would dominate the picture. And therefore, I took the slight liberty of spraying that everywhere, which also I think makes the whole aesthetic more interesting, and feels a bit more in tune with the kind of like 21st century as well.
Jonathan Yeo has also painted Camilla and Prince Philip back in 2008. The King earlier had honoured the Archbishop of Canterbury for his role in the coronation. This, his first portrait since the ceremony, capturing his emergence into the role. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Now, the destiny of the Premier League title is back in Manchester City's hands. A hard-fought victory at Tottenham means If City win their final match of the season on Sunday, they will seal an unprecedented fourth successive title. Well, City won 2-0 with Erling Haaland scoring both goals. Second-placed Arsenal now have to win against Everton and hope City drop points against West Ham to take the title. The result also means Spurs cannot catch Aston Villa in fourth, so Villa qualify for next season's Champions League. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the political journalist and broadcaster, Theo Usherwood, and the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda. Welcome to both of you. Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Metro. Its headline, the UK's record 3 million food parcels. That and plenty more, of course, when we come back. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, our top stories this evening. There were further protests inside and outside Georgia's Parliament building as MPs approved the controversial Foreign Influence Bill, which critics call a Russian-style threat to free speech. A new study has found the anti-obesity drug semaglutide could reduce the risk of a heart attack or stroke, regardless of the amount of weight loss. And police in northwest France are still searching for an escaped prisoner after 2 officers were killed during an ambush on a convoy as Mohamed Amra was being taken back to jail. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the political journalist and broadcaster, Theo Usherwood, and the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda. Welcome to both of you. So as ever, let us check out the front pages, starting with The Guardian. And amid the protests in Georgia over the new so-called foreign agent laws, The Guardian says America has warned the Georgian government not to side with Russia against the West. The Eye is leading with the new weight loss jab that is offering hope to millions of people suffering from obesity. The Daily Mail says that sex education is to be banned from children under the age of 9 and adds that gender identity may no longer be taught either. That story is also the main item on the front of tomorrow's Times. Meanwhile, The Telegraph says the policing minister is calling on forces to start using stop-and-search tactics once again. The Metro reports that a record 3 million food parcels have been handed out to struggling UK families in the last year, double the figure of 5 years ago, as more people find it hard to cope with the cost of living. Daily Express says experts believe the government's reforms have a fighting chance of cutting migration to the UK to 150,000 a year. Financial Times has the latest on a takeover wrangle involving 2 of the world's biggest mining companies, Anglo America and BHP. The Daily Mirror pictures TV presenter Ant McPartlin and his wife with their new baby boy named Wilder. And without going into details, The Star has a story about loo rolls. Wait for the inside pages for that one. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Theo Usherwood and to Sonia Soda. Welcome to both of you. And Sonia, why don't we kick off with the Metro, which is amidst the cost of living crisis, a reminder that people are finding it very, very difficult to live.
Absolutely. So the Trussell Trust, which is a charity, food bank charity in the UK, the UK's main food bank charity, has revealed that in the year to the end of March, it's distributed over 3 million food parcels to families. So this is incredibly worrying. We've also had child poverty statistics in recent weeks that shows that now almost 1 in 3 children is living in relative child poverty, and 1 in 6 is living in what's known as kind of food insecurity, which means that food is a really pressing concern for their parents. And I think we're an incredibly rich country. It's very worrying, the position that we're in. Obviously, some of it is to do with the cost of living crisis, but it's also, I think, to do with the fact that when you look at where the tax and benefit system was in 2010, it suffered some real cuts. So if you're parents with kids in the bottom 10% of the income distribution, you've lost, on average, £4,000 a year as a result of the government's benefit and tax credit cuts. That's 20% of your income. That's just not something you can afford to lose.
And yet the government's, unashamed effort is to get people back to work. And the idea is if benefits are too generous, people do not strive to find employment. So, that's part of the balance of this, isn't it?
And I think also, I'd just point you to what was said last week, with what came out of the ONS last week, with GDP up by 0.6%. And of course, we're supposed to be outpacing, the numbers say we're outpacing Germany, France and the United States in terms of growth in the first quarter of this year, beating forecasts. But actually what people are seeing at home when they're trying to make the sums add up is very different. And people now relying more than ever, well, as we've seen the figure, double the total number of 5 years ago, on food parcels. And that's not as just those at the very bottom of the income scale starting to creep up as well. Bless you, Sonia.
Yes, they talk about pensioners as well. Parcels for households with a pensioner were up by 27% to 179,000, as older people, particularly renters, find themselves unable to afford essentials and face hunger and severe hardship, even with the triple lock in place, I guess. Just quickly on that, then.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned housing costs there, and the UK's got some of the highest rents in Europe. And this is the thing, when we say cost of living, yeah, it's the price of food that has gone up. We've seen inflation of sort of 10%, but, housing costs in this country, whether you're renting or whether you're paying a mortgage, are really extortionate. And if you're poor and living in rented housing, so much of your budget is going out on rent at the moment that it doesn't, and, on energy bills as well, which are still very high. They may have come down a bit, but they're still very high. It just isn't leaving enough for people to sort of live on.
To the Eye now, and they're picking up on a story that many papers led on this time last night, in fact. The gold rush of weight loss drugs. 322 anti-obesity drugs are in development worldwide. This is fascinating, but there's a danger of, the food companies force us to eat, and then the pharma companies make us lose weight. So, what do we do for ourselves at this point?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? The follow-on, obviously, from the Eye is they're trying to broaden this out and show just how extensive this revolution in weight loss drugs could be. And of course, it centres around this drug called, I'm hoping I pronounce it correctly here, semaglutide. And it's a medication that has been found to have helped not just those with, and this is when it comes to heart attacks and cardiac arrest, but also potentially helps with alcohol addiction, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's as well. And it's hope, this is the hope at least, that weight loss drugs aren't just going to become something you actually have to go and see your doctor and have an injection for. You will actually be able to have it at home. It'll be a pill. It'll be really, really easy to take yourself, to be prescribed by your doctor. And if you think about surgery for those suffering from chronic obesity, the hope is that actually it might be able to save the NHS millions. But all the while, these drugs are actually going to be available privately. If you've got the means, if you've got the medical insurance, you can get them privately. Will there be enough drugs left over for those who just rely on the NHS?
Yes, indeed. And a lot of people talking about some of the side effects of this and the funding of part of this study as well, which showed the heart health benefits of this. But is this the revolution, do you think, that some people, in the West particularly, have been looking at?
Yeah, well, I doubt it's going to be a silver bullet, and I think if you talk to clinicians on this, that's what they'll say, because actually the best way to take care of your heart, etc., is to try and make your lifestyle healthier when it comes to stuff like drinking and eating. But I think, without a doubt, Ozempic and Wegovy, the brand name for this drug, is going to play a really important role. And potentially, now this story is saying it could have even wider uses. A drug like aspirin, originally a painkiller, and it's very cheap and people take it to thin their blood now. Statins are also sometimes talked about as a wonder drug. That stuff is still, it's not all proven yet. But I think Theo's right to bring up the issues of oversupply, which is that, there's a limited supply at the moment. There's a lot of people who aren't actually that fat who want to use it for weight loss. I know some of them. They're certainly not mortally obese. They'd maybe a size 14, they'd like to be a size 10. And there is a shortage on the NHS of people who really need this drug because they've got conditions like diabetes and they need to be prescribed it by their doctor. So there's clearly an access issue that relates to just how popular it is because, for people who... It's really expensive, I have to confess. When I was hearing these stories, I did go and look at how much it is. It's really expensive. But there are clearly people who can afford it.
Yes, and just a related story as well. I'm just going to whiz through if you don't mind, because we've got a lot to pack in tonight. The Telegraph reporting that overweight men being paid up to £400 each by the NHS to lose weight in a scheme which is proving very successful. The trial found that sending men a daily text message rewarding them of their desire to lose weight with cash rewards for success was an effective way to get patients in shape. Fascinating.
Dubbed the Game of Stones by the NHS. And they can, we're told, this is the report in Daily Telegraph, scale it up and it could be rolled out to other parts of the NHS. And of course, this would be maybe, they'd say it's not so costly when you compare the cost against dealing with people overweight further down the treatment line in the NHS. But they think that actually men are responding very well to it.
Right. Daily Mail and The Times both leading on a story about sex education and what the Mail calls gender dogma. Front page of The Telegraph also, actually. What is the latest?
So there's two facets to this story. One is the age at which sex education gets taught in schools. The government setting out clear statutory guidance that sex education should not be taught until age 9. And then at age 11, more subjects can be... So at age 9, it would be about the processes of sex. age 11.
Even at that point?
I think so, yeah. And actually, I'm trying to remember when I had sex education, because I think most kids kind of know what's going... Like, they know... I think most kids have, well, maybe not. But then there's all this stuff around, you know, when should they learn about domestic abuse? When should they learn about stalking? When should they learn that they shouldn't be sending each other naked photos of themselves? When should they be learning about porn? So that's in this story. The other really important element of this story is around gender identity ideology. And we know it's very hard to know how far it goes, but we know that some schools have been teaching gender identity as fact. So, you know, they've been telling children, you can be born in the wrong body. Sex isn't binary, it is a spectrum. Actually, if you like girly things and you're a boy, maybe it actually means you're a girl, which is actually quite a damaging sexist, regressive idea in the name of sort of progressive ideology. And actually, that's not right, because there's clear law around what schools can and can't teach, and they can't teach contested beliefs, political beliefs and contested beliefs as fact. Like, they can't teach, you know, religion as fact as well if it's a state-funded school. So the government is saying they shouldn't be doing this, and that's really important because we've had the Cass review, which was an independent review looking at kind of children who are gender questioning, how best to support them. And it's not helpful if you're teaching very young children who aren't sophisticated enough to understand the concept, things like you can be born in the wrong body, and if you're a boy who likes playing with girls' toys, maybe you're actually a girl.
I know, I mean, this is, you know, you've been very strong on this, haven't you? The Times also with this, don't teach pupils about gender ID. The problem is, on sex education and this, that social media is kind of accelerating, you know, people's... The way they have this visibility of all this information to them. So it's very difficult to work out the ages, isn't it?
There doesn't seem to be a blanket...
There
doesn't seem to be a blanket rule about when children get mobile phones, but the sort of, from what I understand, it's around year 6, which is sort of 10 or 11, that a lot of parents decide to give their children mobile phones. But actually, when you look at the Times has quite a lot of good, detail about exactly what the government's proposing. So they shouldn't be given any form of sex education until year 5, which is, of course, 9 and over. Then domestic violence, coercive control and sexual violence should not be discussed until children are 13. And then detailed conversations about pornography, the Times reporting, should be delayed until year 9. So I think that's 13, 14, if I'm right. So what the government's proposing is actually bringing in limits on where this particular parts of education are, where the detail of this particular part of sex education and relationship education is coming in. It's actually after, when many parents are providing their children with mobile phones or screen devices, sometimes even younger, and that potentially they will have access to them unless you can, as a parent, it's really, really difficult to do, make sure that the appropriate controls are in place.
Yeah, fascinating, very difficult, certainly, as well. Plenty more to come, including America's warning to Georgia about siding with Russia against the West. On the front of The Guardian and elsewhere, no doubt. Back in a moment.
It's huge, yes, because until a couple of years ago, all of the designated swimming spots were coastal spots, and now the latest 16 that we're going to add are river locations. So that's quite a breakthrough. It's a very important step in trying to clean up the rivers in the UK. The important part about having designated bathing areas is that they'll be tested weekly by the Environment Agency for any biological contamination. So depending on the state of the river that they're testing, if it's good, then they'll just leave well alone. But if it's poor, then they'll start a process of investigating any of the pollution and trying to eradicate it. So that's what's really important. And that was the whole point of applying for bathing water status. Well, for me, it's quite a few different things. I'm possibly not a usual person. I like to train in the river. So I do events up to about 10k long, and I love just a really long, relaxing sort of 13k river swim. There's long stretches in the countryside here. I also enjoy a very social dip. There's a huge growth lately, particularly since COVID, of people coming in just to float around in nature and relax. So it's a little bit of exercise, a little bit of social. Everything for me is about being outdoors and in nature as well. So it gives me all of that. And here we have kingfishers and otters. So it's really a beautiful place to be. Go with people that know where you're going to go in. So I'm sat here by the river in Shrewsbury. There's quite strong currents here. So you need to be very aware of what the river does. And you can get in and it can feel absolutely fine close to the shore, but as you get a bit further out, you can suddenly get swept away. So really top tip, always make sure you know where you're going to get out once you've got in. So make sure you can get back out. If you get carried away downstream, check that there's exit points. Rivers are quite dangerous places, so you need to be careful.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me once again, the political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Soda. Welcome back to both of you. Theo, an extraordinary day in Georgia, certainly, with protests against this Russian law, as the protesters are calling it, and now the ramifications for relations with the European Union and indeed America.
This seems to be another example of Russia extending its tentacles to former satellite states. This time it's Georgia, and it relates to this law which has just been passed, and the US are pressing Georgia not to bring it into actual force. But what it means is that if you're an NGO or if you're a media company operating in Georgia and more than 20% of your funding comes from overseas, then you need to declare where that money has come from. And the fear is, from those on the streets of Tbilisi, extraordinary scenes there, that's going to stifle free speech, it's going to stifle free expression, and that this is, in effect, Georgia pandering to exactly what the Kremlin wants. And as a result, the US Assistant Secretary of State, this is in The Guardian, Jim O'Brien, has spoken of his fears of the Foreign Agents Bill as being yet another, as he described it, turning point in the former Soviet states' troubled history, that Georgia now has a choice, and it's decided to go with Russia rather than facing towards Europe and the United States. And of course, the ramifications that will inevitably have for any plans it might have to join the European Union, which of course many of these protesters desperately want.
Yeah, some extraordinary scenes today. Going to move on, if you don't mind, to the King. First completed portrait since the coronation. There it is, on front page of lots of times. Hands up if you like it.
Yes.
OK.
It's unanimous. King Charles has got himself a good one, I think. So this is a painter, Jonathan Yeo. I think it's incredibly striking, actually, and very flattering. It's obviously very red. Some people may have noticed that. I think that's a reflection of the uniform that he's wearing. So he's in his Welsh Guards uniform. It was actually commissioned back in 2020, so before he became king. And viewers might notice there's a little butterfly above his right shoulder, and that is meant to signal sort of the change, from a little caterpillar into a butterfly. And it's thought to be quite fitting, A, because the king really loves nature, clearly, but B, because, during the sort of painting of the creation of this portrait, he did undergo quite an important change in becoming king. So I know it's proved a little bit controversial, but I really like it. I think it's very flattering.
Queen Camilla has said that, yes, you've got him, to the artist Jonathan Yeah, so she's a fan of it. I often think when we look at these portraits that they publish, whether they're heads of state or prime ministers, so often you just want to you say, oh, it's lovely, isn't it? But really you're kind of looking as you're not quite sure. But actually this time,
if someone painted me like that, I'd be really happy.
Both of you, thank you very much indeed. See you for more in the 11. Right now, here's the weather. Well, low pressure means an unsettled week ahead with showers or longer spells of rain for many, although it will feel warm in any sunny spells. Wednesday will start mainly dry despite some low cloud around. Northern and eastern England will see rain. There'll also be a few showers in the far southwest. Cloud and patchy rain will linger over northern and eastern England through the morning, perhaps reaching parts of central England too. Elsewhere, expect some sunshine, but there will be a scattering of heavy showers, especially for Ireland. It'll be warm for many, very warm in northern Scotland, cool under the cloud and where any fog lingers near the North Sea coast.